So here the next part of the discussion, that is new chapter, metallurgy. So in this, let us go with introduction. In introduction, when you go for metallurgy, metallurgy is a branch of chemistry which deals with that is profitable extraction of metal, from its mineral ore, the extraction of metal. So extraction of metal, if you go for the extraction of metal, it depends on 2 to 3 important stages, that is dressing of ore, then concentration of ore, then purification of metal. Sometimes the extraction of metal also depends upon the feasibility. Depends on economy and source of availability. So based on this, here frankly speaking, you can put it in, you can cut short it. So the extraction of metal also sometimes depends upon choice of mineral ore. We can also take choice of mineral ore. So here frankly speaking, we should categorize the introduction of metallurgy into three parts. One is there are some metals, elements like carbon, silver, gold. Then you can take, that is copper. They occur in free states. So they don't need any separate special extraction. So for that, because they are occurring in their elemental form or in the free form, there is no need for the extraction. But if you go for the extraction of metal, for example mineral, if you take this is nothing but the compound which occurs naturally in Earth's crust. The compound which occurs naturally in the Earth's crust, we can call it as mineral. And if you go for ore, an ore is nothing but a compound or a mineral. An ore is a substance or a compound in which metal is extracted profitably. So this comes under the introduction of the metallurgy. So here we are trying to differentiate the mineral from mineral ore, and we are also trying to differentiate those elements wherein which we are trying to get, where we are able to get naturally occurring metals are also there. For that we don't need any separate isolation. For example, there are some methods. For example, if you go for elements highly electropositive elements are extracted, prepared through electrolytic process, as these are present in the electropositive elements or electropositive metals, I can say these are nothing but electropositive metals. These are nothing but the highly electropositive metals and highly reactive metals. That's why in the purest form they should be prepared through electrolytic process. So here the next part of the discussion is, that is occurrences of metals. So metals occurrences again depends upon the nature of ores, the choice of the ore with which we are trying to extract the metal. So we can just take it like this: mineral ore, then metal extracted. We'll take it like this: mineral ore and metal extracted. So here in the mineral ore, if you take, that is if you take bauxite for example, if you are taking bauxite and its composition, metal extracted and its composition, if you take its composition, so you can just take it like this: mineral ore is bauxite, metal to be extracted is aluminium, and the composition is Al2O3 2H2O. Sometimes you can also take, that is gibbsite, again metal extracted is aluminium and it has Al2O3, that is 3H2O. Sometimes it is alumina, then again the metal extracted is aluminium, it is simply Al2O3. Sometimes it is magnetite. If you take, then you can take that is Fe3O4, metal to be extracted is iron. I repeat, so here metal to be extracted is iron and the mineral ore is magnetite, oxide of iron, this is Fe, and hematite, if you take metal is iron and here it is mineral ore is Fe2O3. Sometimes you can take iron pyrites. If you take iron pyrites, again the metal is iron and it is FeS2. So you can take, likewise you can also take copper also. If you take copper and zinc, copper is copper pyrites, if you take Cu2S of Fe2S3, so here the metal to be extracted is copper. Sometimes copper glans, if you take Cu2S, metal to be extracted is copper. You can even sometimes take cuprite also you can take, it is simply nothing but the oxide Cu2O and it is copper. Then you can take, that is you can take calamine is ZnCO3, metal to be extracted is zinc. Then you can take zinc blende, it is ZnS and the metal to be extracted is zinc. And you can also take, that is calamine, zinc blende, cuprite, copper glans, copper pyrites, iron pyrites, so on and so forth. Sometimes you can even take siderite. If you take siderite, so this is going to be iron and it is FeCO3. So all this comes under the, that is metal extraction. So bauxite, aluminium, gibbsite, alumina, Al2O3, magnetite, Fe2O3, hematite, FeO, iron pyrites, FeS2, copper pyrites, copper, FeS2, then copper glans, Ce2S, cuprite, copper Cu2O, then that is zinc, calamine, zinc blend, ZNS, and the last one is that is siderite, comes under siderite. So here all these cases, and here that means depending upon the choice of the mineral ore, we are trying to take the respective mineral ore. And here this comes under, all this comes under, that is oxide mineral ores, oxide mineral ores. Then this comes under pyrite, pyrite mineral ores. Again this is oxide mineral ore. This is carbonate mineral ore, again pyrite, pyrite mineral ore, and finally again carbonate mineral ore. So these are some of the important mineral ores where we can finalize for the isolation and the extraction of metal from the mineral ores. So here the next part of the discussion is, that is metallurgical extraction of metal. Metallurgical extraction of metal involves 4 important steps. The first method is, that is the first part of the method is crushing of mineral ore, crushing of mineral ore. Second is, that is concentration of mineral ore, concentration of mineral ore. Then third one, if you take, that is purification of metal, and finally that is refining of metal, purification of metal, and finally refining of metal. So here in the refining of metal, so here what we have to understand is, here is the advantage of taking the mineral ore and crushing it to fine powder is, it is easy for us to remove the impurities. The crushing of mineral ore is not that important, just it's a preliminary method where we try to take the mineral ore in the crude form, we just crush it and get it into the fine powdered form. Once we are converting it into the fine powdered form, the powdered form of the impure mineral ore is always advantage for us to remove all the insoluble impurities present in it, volatile or non-volatile impurities, whatever they are present in the mineral ore. They can be removed when the mineral ore is in the powdered form instead of present in the crude form in the form of uneven sized particles. So that is the only advantage of the crushing form. But when you go for the concentration of mineral ore, this is one of the most important area in the metallurgical process for the extraction of metal in the metallurgy. So the concentration of the mineral ore involves many methods. Concentration is nothing but wetting the mineral ore, and depending upon the choice of the mineral ore which we are trying to take, we try to use different methods for that is removal of the impurities. And here actually in the concentration of the mineral ore, I think we can go for that is, you can take one is hand picking method. In the concentration of the mineral ore, hand picking method. Then you can take froth flotation method. Then this is hydraulic washing, or sometimes we call it as leaching method. And magnetic separation. Sometimes we can also use magnetic separation. And in this magnetic separation method, in this concentration of the ore, what we come across is, like, we use one fundamental term in the concentration of ore. Our core area of concentration of the mineral ore is to remove impurities present in mineral ore. Remove the impurities present in mineral ore. So you just generally, there are two methods of removing the impurities. If the ore contains the basic impurities, then we add that is acidic flux. We add acidic flux. Flux added is acidic if the ore is basic. Basic is impurities. Then you get a neutralizing substance fusible mass called slag. This is called fusible mass. Fusible mass. For example, if you can take one example, acidic flux means, then suppose if you are having SiO2 as an impurity. If SiO2 is the impurity that is present in the mineral ore, for example, SiO2 is the impurity present in bauxite. Impurity present in white bauxite. SiO2 is the impurity present in white bauxite. So that means here we take SiO2 as an impurity, acidic impurity, and for this we add, that is the neutralizing substance, that is basic flux. We add basic flux, acidic impurity, basic flux. Basic flux means you can take calcium oxide as a basic flux. So you're going to get calcium silicate, that is slag. Slag is called fusible mass. Slag is the fusible mass. On the other hand, this is one way, and the next case is, if you are taking the same ore, if the ore is that is acidic, it contains acidic impurity. If the ore is acidic impurity, so we add that is flux. We add flux. So therefore it is going to become basic impurity, basic flux. So you are going to get fusible mass, that is slag. So suppose, for example, you are taking in the extraction of particularly in the iron, there are some volatile impurities like phosphorus pentoxide. If P2O5 is the acidic impurity, then for that, if P2O5 is the acidic impurity, then I think here basic impurity, and 2 times we have repeated acidic, no problem. Acidic impurity, basic, if you take flux, you are going to take calcium oxide is the basic flux. So you are going to get calcium phosphate is a slag. So this is what you have to keep it in mind. So here I'll take 3, and here there are 2 phosphorus atoms. So that is, we have 8, 4 to the 8 oxygens, yes, 3 calciums and 2 phosphorus atoms. So this is how we get the slag here, and that is how we can just remove the acidic impurities as well as basic impurities present in the, that is mineral ore, by converting the ore to fusible mass called slag. So here in the concentration of the mineral ore, let us go to the concentration of the mineral ore, that is number 1. In the concentration of mineral ore, concentration of, that is mineral ore, the concentration of mineral ore, we can take, that is levitation or hydraulic washing method. This is, in this, the principle involved is principle involved is density of the impurities. Density of the impurities are lesser than the density of the ore particles. Ore particles. That means here the ore particles are heavier and the impurities are lighter. So that means here in terms of mass, greater mass, and here it is having lesser mass. This is the method. And here what we are going to do is we have a horizontal slope platform like this. These are called raffles. These are called raffles, and from here we try to take the crushed mineral ore. This is the crushed mineral ore, and there is a flow of water, hydraulic washing. The water is continuously poured, and finally here it is received, and you find that the particles here you find that the ore particles free from impurities. Impurities are collected. So what is which kind of mineral ores we subject it to this kind of hydraulic washing, that is hydraulic washing or litigation. Here if you take, then this you can take examples, all the metals which are in their native form, that is gold you can take, then you can take tin, SnO2, then Fe2O3, then FeCr, FeCrO4, chromite. Actually this SnO2 is called tin stone. SnO2 is called tin stone, that is stannic dioxide is the best method where we employ for that is litigation or hydraulic washing method. Then the second method is froth flotation process. Froth flotation. In the froth flotation process, usually we carry out the choice of the mineral ore. The choice of the mineral ore is pyrite mineral ore. You can take any number of examples for pyrite mineral ores. FeS2, you can take zinc sulfide, you can take Fe2S of that is Cu2S of Fe2S3, all these are the pyrite mineral ores. The best method of the froth flotation process, pyrite mineral ores. And here actually in the pyrite mineral ores, that is during the froth flotation process, the ore is first crushed. It is crushed to fine powder. The ore is crushed to fine powder, and this fine powder is mixed with water, and it becomes froth. And for this froth we try to add some stabilizers. So here what we are noticing here is what is the exact principle involved here. Principle involved here is, in the case of froth flotation process, ore is wetted by oil particles, and impurities are wetted. Impurities are nothing but the gangue particles. Are wetted by water. So what is happening here is, we just try to take, in this froth flotation process, we just try to take a small container wherein which you find that the vacuum of frequently, with the blast of hot air being blown, you can just take the froth. You can see the froth. This is the froth, and you find all the impurities settle at the bottom. Impurities settle at the bottom, and the froth it just skims up like this, free from the impurities. This froth comes to the top and it is removed, and the impurities are left behind. Froth skimming, which is free from the impurities. And this is blast of hot air. Hot air is blown into the sprinkle, that is this is trickling holes wherein which the air keeps on blowing. All the the pyrite mineral ores, when they come in contact with water, if any impurities are there, these impurities are heavier than the pyrite ore particles. So all the impurities, because of their heavier nature, they just settle at the bottom of the container, and all the pyrite mineral ores, they produce a kind of froth. By adding the pine oil, they produce a kind of froth. A lot of foam is produced. Along with the foam, the pyrite mineral ore is separated out, and now it is free from the impurities. In this way, we will separate all the pyrite mineral ores, leaving behind all the impurities, that is the gangue particles, by wetting them with the water molecules, and the ore particles are wetted with the oil particles. So this is the simple principle involved in the froth flotation process. Of course, froth flotation process involves in the chemical methods, in the chemical extraction method, it involves roasting as well as calcination, and also roasting and calcination have two different methods where we can convert the given pyrite mineral ore to oxides and also sulfides, but that we can deal later. But this is the simple method of understanding the froth flotation process, which we actually use in the concentration of mineral ore. So here the next part of the discussion of the concentration of the mineral ore is, that is magnetic separation. If you go for the magnetic separation, actually this magnetic separation is used for mineral ores which containing magnetic impurities like Fe2O3 of the tin stone ore. Tin stone is a mineral ore which is actually called as SnO2. Frankly speaking, this SnO2, if you take, it contains Fe2O3 as magnetic impurities. We call this as magnetic impurities. So that's why what we are doing here is, the best thing what we can do here is, you take the magnetic separation, take two magnetic rollers like this. There's a belt in which constantly it will be moving in the direction, and here you are going to take the crushed mineral ore, crushed ore, and you find that these are the magnetic rollers. You can find that these two are the magnetic rollers, and you find that in one side you find all the the concentrated ore particles free from the impurities, and here you find the magnetic impurities. So in this way we can separate the magnetic impurities from that of the separate the magnetic impurities from that of the non-magnetic ore particles, and we can go for the next stage of the isolation of the metal from the mineral ores, that is tin stone. So this SnO2 is called tin stone mineral ore, and we are separating the magnetic impurities, and after that we are going for the next part of the method, that is leaching method. In leaching method, usually if you take oxide mineral ores, in particular bauxite, if you take bauxite, it contains Al2O3, 2H2O, and it contains impurities like you can take SiO2, Fe2O3, ferric hydroxide. All these are the various impurities. So all these impurities have to be removed out from the bauxite mineral ore. So therefore we should add a leaching agent. So for example, if I am adding, and not only that, even if you go for that is gold and silver. even for gold and silver, in the extraction of gold and silver also, we try to add they can be I mean purified by adding leachants or leaching agents. So here we try to add the leaching agents, in particular in the case of gold and silver, we can add the leaching agents like sodium cyanide, potassium cyanide are the best leaching agents. LEA stands for leaching agent, and similarly the NaOH is a leaching agent for purification of bauxite. Leaching agent for purification of bauxite. So for example, if you take bauxite, then Al2O3, 2H2O is the bauxite. Then if you add NaOH as a leaching agent, then this bauxite immediately it gets converted to NaAlO2 plus 3H2O. This is called sodium meta-aluminate. This we call it as sodium meta-aluminate. 4 plus 3 is 7, and here 3 plus 2 5 plus 2 7. Yes, this is sodium meta-aluminate. This sodium meta-aluminate, take the sodium meta-aluminate and again you add water, subject it to dilution. When you're subjecting it to dilution, you get aluminium hydroxide, that is white precipitate plus again sodium hydroxide is regenerated. That means leaching agent is again regenerated. So therefore, to balance the equation, I think the reaction is yet to get balanced, because we have 1 sodium, 1 aluminium, 4 hydrogens are there. So we have 4 oxygens. So suppose if I take 2 over here, yes, the reaction gets balanced because 3 plus 1, 4 hydrogens are there. So the catalyst consumed is nothing but equal to catalyst regenerated. In the first step, the leaching agent is getting consumed, and in the second step, the leaching agent is regenerated. And finally, this aluminium hydroxide, which is acting as a white precipitate, it is heated to 1200 degrees centigrade. It is actually heated 1200 degrees centigrade. This Al2O3 plus 3H2O is obtained, which is in the purified form, which is actually obtained. This is undergoes 3 stages. This is filtered. Actually, it is filtered, then dried, then it is heated, and after heating, you get the pure form of the alumina. So in this way, we can subject it to leaching in the case of bauxite. Now similarly, if you want to subject the leaching for gold and silver also, we can carry out the methods, but bleaching method is the best method to remove the impurities which are insoluble impurities, which way they can be separated easily from the main part of the mineral ore, and that is again subjected to the further refining process or the electrolytic process, whatever, depending upon the nature of the metal present in the mineral ore. After the purification, it is subjected to the next method for the refining of that particular metal. So here the topic is leaching of precious metals. Leaching of precious metals, that is gold and silver. If you take, yes, they too can involve in the leaching method. Gold and silver. So here, as in the equation, it is very clear that the metal is silver and gold. It is very clear. So what we are doing here is, this is acting as a leaching agent. La. This leaching agent is diluted in the presence of water by adding small amount of gas. It is giving an complex, that is cyano complex. We get a cyano complex, and this cyano complex, and here you are going to get metal in the solid state, and take this cyano complex, and if you treat it with the, if you are treating it with the metallic zinc, then zinc will try to displace the original metal whatever you are trying to use in the case of the, the extraction of the metal, that is gold and silver. So for example, if I am taking one example, if I would like to give you, then I think you get some clarity over this generalized equations whatever I gave you. For example, if I take Ag2S plus potassium cyanide or sodium cyanide, whatever, sodium cyanide if I am going to use, this is acting as a leaching agent, so it gives a complex that is NaAgCN taken twice plus, that is Na2S, Na2S, I think so, because there are two silvers, so I am going to take 2 over here and I am going to take 4 over here. What we are noticing here is this is a complex, this is called sodium dicyano argentate, because it's an anionic complex, we can say argentate 1 complex, it's an anionic complex. So now you want to again extract, that means whatever the impurities are present, the impurities present in the silver, this is actually silver glance, if you take the silver glance, then you can take, by adding the leaching agent, sodium cyanide acting as a leaching agent, it converts sodium dicyano, that is sodium dicyano argentate complex, we are going to get anionic complex. Now take this sodium NaAgCN taken twice plus zinc gives you can take this as Na2, that is Zn of Cn taken 4 times plus, now the metal is going to be extracted here, the metal is displaced, so zinc is trying to reduce, because here the silver is having +1 oxidation state and here silver is having 0 oxidation state, so therefore zinc is perfectly acting as a good reducing agent, because in the reactivity series also the hydrogen is present above the hydrogen in the reactivity series because of the low standard reduction potential, high negative electrode potentials for the zinc makes it to become highly reactive metal, so therefore it has a good reducing action, so it easily displaces the silver which is placed at the bottommost of below the hydrogen in the reactivity series. So the silver is displaced here. Now this silver which is obtained is pure silver which we got, so we that's why we are using 2 steps here. So for example, if I want to justify the same reaction, just suppose if I am taking there as the generalized equation, suppose if I am taking 4 moles of Ag solid plus 8 moles of cyanide ion, if I am going to take plus 2 moles of water plus small amount of oxygen gas, if I am taking, then I think I am going to get definitely, that is AgCN taken twice of 2 minus plus, that is 2 moles of silver solid which is in the pure form. This is what we need to expect here, and yeah, this is what we need to expect. Actually this oxygen is just acting as a catalyst and water also it is acting as a catalyst. These two components, they have nothing to do with the reaction. These are only because it's a leaching agent, because the cyanide is a leaching agent. The cyanide by itself cannot act as a leaching agent. In the presence of water and oxygen only it can act as a leaching agent. That's why we are going to get this complex silver cyanide complex, that is dicyano argentate complex we are getting. So therefore we can just take here, that is the metal complex. So here also, yeah, the same metal whatever you get, so take this complex here, so take this complex again, continuation, this is A and this is B. If we go for the second case, that is silver dicyanide complex, if you're going to take, that is minus, take the minus complex, I think this should be -1, this should be minus of complex, yeah, here also it is minus of complex. So here you can take, you add zinc over here, aqueous, take 2 moles, add zinc solid, you're going to get ZnCN taken ZnCN taken 4 times of 2 minus plus 2 moles of Ag solid, which is in the pure form. So by these two equations it is very clear that this is the finest method for extraction of gold and silver, but in both the cases we are trying to show the extraction of silver only. So here zinc is playing a very important role in that is displacing the silver from the anionic complex. So that's why this is called leaching method of leaching of precious metals, that is gold and silver. To remove the impurities, we are trying to use the leaching agent in the form of, that is cyanides along with water and oxygen. In this way we can get the pure form of metals of gold and silver. Next part of the discussion is, that is extraction of crude or free metal from its concentrated ore. So this involves actually 2 or 3 steps. Actually here we use the term, that the important terms which are metallurgical terms, important metallurgical terms which we use are, first one is that is calcination. If we take calcination, heating mineral ore below its melting point in the absence of oxygen. In the absence of oxygen is calcination, and all carbonate and oxide mineral ores are calcinated. For example, if you take oxide mineral ores Al2O3 of 2H2O, when it is subjected to heating, it becomes Al2O3 plus 2H2O. This is hydrated form and this is anhydrous form. Fe2O3 of XH2O, when it is subjected to calcination, you get, that is Fe2O3 plus XH2O. MgCO3, CaCO3 both are carbonate mineral ores. MgCO3 dot CaCO3, it is dolomite. So mineral ore, carbonate mineral ore, yes, it is subjected to calcination, so you heat it, you're going to get magnesium oxide plus calcium oxide plus carbon dioxide. So you get 2 moles of carbon dioxide. It is subjected to calcination. So zinc carbonate, calamine, and it is subjected to, this is calamine if you take, yes, it is subjected to that is calcination. You get zinc oxide plus carbon dioxide. FeCO3 siderite, also it is subjected to calcination, and you get ferrous oxide solid plus carbon dioxide gas. So it is very clear from these equations that in the carbonate mineral ores and the oxide mineral ores, they are subjected to calcination. If you go for, that is, if you are going for, that is the second case, that is B, roasting. If you go for roasting, if you take heating a mineral ore to below its melting point, in the presence of oxygen, we call it as roasting. Then all pyrite ores are roasted. all pyrite ores are roasted means the best example what we can take for example, you take iron pyrites. It is subjected to roasting. You get Fe2O3 plus sulfur dioxide. This is pyrite, iron pyrite ores. So this is 11 oxygens. Then you take, this is 8. If you take 4, if I am taking 4 over here, that is 11 2s are 22 oxygens means, suppose if I am taking 2, and here if I am taking 8 oxygens if I take, then if I take 4 over here, then if I take 2 over here, 8 2s are 16, 16 plus 6 22, 22 oxygens are there. So therefore here I can take 11 oxygen gas, 11 moles of oxygen gas, iron pyrites. Then similarly we can take that is zinc sulfide, zinc blend. We take zinc blend, this is zinc pyrites. You can take, subjected to oxygen, you get zinc oxide plus SO2. This is oxidizing roasting. So you can balance the equation. You can just take 2 over here and take 2 over here and take 2 over here and take 3 over here. The reaction gets balanced. The same zinc sulfide, if it is subjected to roasting, you get zinc sulfate, directly sulfatizing roasting. So no byproduct, directly we get sulfatizing roasting. So take 2 over here, gas, zinc sulfate, this is sulfatizing roasting. So this we call it as sulfatizing roasting. So that is the difference between oxidizing roasting and sulfatizing roasting. So like that you can take number of examples. You can even take galena, PbS plus O2 gives rise to PbO, plumbous oxide plus sulfur dioxide, and plumbous oxide also further gets reduced to give the lead which undergoes mutual reduction or self reduction. So that topic we can discuss later. So here the next part of the discussion is, in the metallurgy we have 3 important extractions. One is iron, copper, and that is iron, copper and zinc are the 3 metals where we have to extract in metallurgy. So in the extraction of metals, from the mineral ores, here we are taking the extraction of iron. In the extraction of iron, I am trying to just explain the metal extraction of iron from its mineral ore through flowchart method. So from where we are starting, this is the stage where we are starting. I am just using the word, this is stage, I am using the word stage 1. This is stage 1. In the stage 1, because whenever we try to extract a metal, the choice of the mineral ore is very important. If you go to the choice of the mineral ore, here we are trying to take the oxide mineral ores, that is hematite or magnetite. Hematite is Fe2O3 and the magnetite is Fe3O4. Fe3O4 is the mixed metal oxide of iron, that is, it contains both ferrous oxide as well as ferric oxide. So the first stage of the extraction of metal is, we are supposed to subject the mineral ore to crushing. Once we crush the mineral ore, we get a crushed mineral ore. Then from crushed mineral ore, immediately we have to subject it to the process of, this crushed mineral ore is subjected to, that is, 2 parts of the mechanism, that is 2 parts of the stages of the mineral ore, that is, crushed mineral ore is subjected to roasting and calcination. So I will rate this as stage 2. This is stage 2. In stage 2, what we are doing is, the crushed mineral ore is subjected to both roasting and calcination. During roasting, you know very well that roasting is in the absence of roasting is in the presence of oxygen, and calcination is the absence of oxygen. So the first A and B, I can say that reaction A and reaction B of the ferric oxide, hydrated iron oxide, if you take hydrated ferric oxide, if you take, it is subjected to roasting, it is subjected to calcination. Because of the calcination, you are finding that without the supply of oxygen, it is subjected to calcination. Because of calcination, 3 molecules of water are removed and you are getting the ferric oxide. Similarly, again in the case of second reaction, that is reaction B, also you are finding that the carbonate mineral ore is converted to ferrous oxide and carbon oxide. And here again, yes, in the last stage, of course, we are subjecting it to, that is, roasting, because here you are passing oxygen. I can say that this is roasting, this last reaction is roasting, and the first 2 reactions are calcinated. Here you can take, because carbonates are calcinated, this is calcinated, and this is also calcinated. So the first two reactions are calcinated, and the last one is roasted. After roasting, we get the roasted mineral ore. Once the mineral ore is subjected to roasting, the roasting and calcination, if it is completed, in the meantime, during roasting and calcination, you're finding that if there are any availability of volatile impurities like carbon dioxide or arsenic or that is sulfur, if the volatile impurities are there, these volatile impurities, they are separated from the oxide mineral ores of Fe2O3 and Fe3O4. Then stage 2, at the stage 2, simultaneously what we are doing, we are introducing the blast furnace. A blast furnace is a huge furnace which is almost 100 feet in height, and it has different zones. The blast furnace has different zones. This blast furnace, it undergoes a process called smelting. Smelting always requires a furnace to carry out the changes in the mineral ore, but roasting and calcination can be done without the blast furnace. Without any furnace, calcination and roasting can be done, but smelting should be done only in the presence of furnace. So therefore, in the blast furnace, you have three different zones actually in the blast furnace. One is called zone of reduction, ZOR is called zone of reduction, another one is zone of absorption, and the other one is zone of fusion. I repeat, ZOR is zone of reduction, ZOA is zone of absorption, and ZOF is zone of fusion. And so therefore, in the meantime, before going to these three zones, what is happening here is during the smelting. That means all this is a part of smelting in the presence of blast furnace. So in the blast furnace, we take ore, coke. Coke is nothing but carbon. Carbon is a good reducing agent. So ore is purified mineral ore of iron, that is Fe2O3 and Fe3O4. Ore, 8 parts of ore, and coke reducing agent, and limestone, they are taken in 4:1 ratio in the form of charge or batch. And the temperature is maintained around 400 degrees centigrade to 1300 degrees centigrade. The lowest possible temperature in the blast furnace is 400 degrees centigrade, and the highest temperature in the blast furnace is around 1300 degrees centigrade. So immediately the smelting process begins in the blast furnace, and it continues in the form of three stages. The first stage is zone of absorption. That is, in the zone of absorption, the ferric oxide of carbon, where the carbon coke is acting as a reducing agent. First, coke carbon converts the oxide of iron to molten iron. Carbon monoxide is obtained, carbon monoxide gas is obtained. So this carbon monoxide, in turn, carbon monoxide also, it's a good reducing agent. Carbon coke is a good reducing agent, carbon monoxide also, it's a good reducing agent. Again, whatever the amount of carbon monoxide is obtained in the first stage of zone of reduction at a temperature of 400 degrees centigrade to 700 degrees centigrade, the carbon monoxide in turn converts the ferric oxide to molten iron, and finally the carbon dioxide gas is released out. So zone of absorption, zone of reduction is completed at a temperature of 400 degrees centigrade to 700 degrees centigrade. Now go for zone of absorption. Whatever the amount of carbon dioxide is obtained here, the coke, the unreacted coke, again converts the carbon dioxide to carbon monoxide gas, and the carbon monoxide gas stays in the zone of absorption. In the meantime, we are also taking limestone. This CaCO3 is called limestone. So take this limestone and you heat it at the same temperature. This limestone, it is getting roasted, because we are not passing oxygen, it is getting we are not passing oxygen, so it is calcinated. So during calcination, the limestone is getting calcinated to calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is removed out, and take the calcium oxide, now treat it with the, now here this calcium oxide will act as that is gangue particle, will act as a gangue particle impurity. So we should add flux for this. So when you add flux, we get a slag here. So the unwanted gangue particles which are present in the limestone also, they are removed by adding acidic flux. This is basic gangue. Acidic flux gives you the fusible mass slag. Then in the zone of fusion, the carbon, it undergoes complete oxidation. Zone of fusion is undergoing complete oxidation under the limits of 1300 degrees centigrade. We get carbon dioxide gas, and this carbon dioxide gas, once it is obtained, now the molten, at the same time, the molten iron which was there at the zone of reduction, at the zone of reduction, whatever the molten iron is there, it reaches the zone of fusion, and the molten iron is collected at the bottom of the bed of the blast furnace, which is called as hearth. Hearth is nothing but a bed where it collects all the fusible mass, and also it releases the slag impurity from the outlet, but the molten iron which we have extracted is kept in the seabed of hearth. So this goes to the completion of the stage 2. Then from stage 2, after the during the process of completion of stage 2, we are coming to stage 3. This stage 3, in the stage 3, from stage 2 we got stage 3. In the stage 3, after completing all this process, we get a new type of iron. That iron is called pig iron. Pig iron is the most impure form of iron. It contains impurity called ferric carbon, and it is melted and solidified, but still it contains 4% of the carbon. 4% of the carbon present in the cast iron. Cast iron indicates that still it is impure, so we have to remove this 4% of carbon, or we have to minimize the percentage of carbon to only 0.3% of carbon. So therefore from stage 3 we are going to stage 4. So this is stage 4. In the stage 4, the cast iron which we got is actually dumped into, that is, reverberatory furnace. RF stands for reverberatory furnace. In the reverberatory furnace, through the process of puddling process, in this puddling process actually the carbon monoxide, when you try to send the fire into the coke, this coke catches fire, it produces carbon monoxide, and carbon monoxide becomes the blue flame. With the help of blue flame in the reverberatory furnace, through the process of puddling process, the cast iron is finally converted to the wrought iron. Wrought iron is the purest form of iron. In the highly pure stage, it contains merely only 0.3% of carbon. So finally, whatever the iron obtained in the stage 4, the stage 4 is the final stage for the obtaining of the pure form of iron, which we call it as the wrought iron. And this concludes the extraction of iron through the flow sheet method or the flow chart method, because learning in this method will not only save time, it will make the students also to understand what is the mechanism going on microscopically from one stage to another stage. The only thing is that the blast furnace, we can just go through the diagram properly from bottom to the top or top to bottom. You will just find these different zones: zone of reduction, zone of absorption to zone of fusion. You can observe there, and you can also find the temperature changes from the bottom to the top of the blast furnace, wherein which you find the highest temperature is present at the bottom stage of the blast furnace, and lowest temperature is present at the topmost region of the blast furnace. At the bottom region of the blast furnace in particular, you find a separate area where we call it as the blast of hot air is passed through the 2 years. Through the 2 years, the blast of hot air is going to enter into the blast furnace, and in the blast furnace the temperature keeps on increasing, and it keeps it keeps decreasing from 1300 degrees centigrade to almost lowest temperature to 400 degrees centigrade, and finally by completing all the 4 stages we are getting the final iron in the pure form, which we call it as wrought iron. So here let us go to the second part of the extraction of metal, that is copper. So in the extraction of metal, that is copper, the extraction of copper metal again depends upon the choice of the mineral ore. So here we are taking the pyrites of copper. When you say pyrites of copper, you can take, that is CO2S of Fe2S3, this is copper pyrites. And you can take copper glans also, you can take. So copper pyrites both contain sulfur here. Copper pyrites, you have sulfur in copper pyrites, and in copper glans also you have sulfur. So take the pyrites ore of copper and you subject it to crushing. Once you crush, you get crushed ore. Then immediately after crushing, that is crushed ore is stage 1, and from stage 1 you subject it to concentration of the ore. Concentration of the ore is stage 2. In the stage 2, during the concentration of ore from stage 2, we are entering into the stage 3. Actually stage 2, stage 3, both of them are the common stages, but from the this roasted ore, that means concentrated ore is subjected to roasting. So roasting is a part of stage 2. So separately why I explained is because once the concentrated ore is subjected to roasting at stage 3, it is subjected to this roasted ore. How the roasting takes place here I have shown you. The pyrites ores are subjected to roasting. During roasting, just you are passing oxygen. A, B and C, all 3 cases are roasting cases. So copper pyrites, the copper pyrites, that is Cu2S of Fe2S3, that is cuprous sulfide, ferric sulfide, copper pyrites, when it is subjected to roasting, it is giving cuprous sulfide and ferrous sulfide, and sulfur dioxide gas is released out. Again the obtained cuprous sulfide is again subjected to roasting. When it is further subjected to roasting, you get cuprous oxide and sulfur dioxide gases evolved, and here whatever the amount of ferrous sulfide is there, that is also a kind of pyrite ore. Again it is converted to oxide ore of iron, and sulfur dioxide gas is removed out. So the process of roasting is completed in these 3 stages in the roasted ore of stage 3. That here the roasting is carried out in the reverberatory furnace. The furnace is reverberatory furnace. Roasting is carried out in the reverberatory furnace, and in the meantime, after completing these 3 reactions and whatever the volatile impurities are there, arsenic and antimony will be the volatile impurities during roasting, and they will be also eliminated in the form of vapors. But the same roasted ore, it is mixed with little amount of sand, and it is subjected to smelting. As I told you many times, smelting is a process which always requires furnace. So again, this roasted ore is subjected to smelting, and it is dumped into the blast furnace. In the blast furnace, whatever the ferrous sulfide we got here, whatever the amount of ferrous sulfide we got in the first stage, that is again subjected to smelting. Smelting is a part of roasting. Within the smelting, roasting also will take place. So ferrous sulfide is converted to ferric oxide, and sulfur dioxide gas is removed out. Now this ferrous oxide is the actual impurity present in the copper. So that ferrous oxide in the form of gangue particles, this is basic gangue particles. So acidic flux should be added, and you're going to get a fusible mass. Once you get once you're going to get ferrous silicate, then the slag is separated, and the remaining mass, whatever you're going to get, that is called matte. This is called actually copper matte. This copper matte, now it is mixed with the sand and passed with the blast of hot air, and it is sent into Bessemer converter to carry out the process of Bessemerization. In the Bessemerization, this copper matte, now which contains cuprous sulfide, is again it is subjected to, because we are passing blast of hot air, so it is oxidized to cuprous oxide, and sulfur dioxide gas is removed out. So it undergoes self reduction. This reaction we call it as self reduction reaction. This is called self or mutual reduction. Self or mutual reduction takes place. So that is cuprous sulfide with the obtained cuprous oxide again in turn reacts with the unreacted cuprous sulfide to give copper and sulfur dioxide gas. This copper which is obtained is called blister copper. Blister copper is the purest form of copper which is obtained, almost, which is 98%, which is pure. But still, to get the 100% purity in the metal, it is further subjected to poling and electrolytic process through the process of refining. So through the process of refining, through the stages of poling and electrolytic process, you get the pure copper. During the electrolytic process, we take 2 electrodes. One electrode is acting as anode and the other electrode is acting as cathode. If any impurities are there, that will become copper mud in the form of copper anode, and the pure copper is going to deposit at the cathode electrode, and finally we are going to get pure copper. This pure copper is almost 99.9%, that is pure. So this is the copper extraction. So here the next part of the discussion is, that is reduction of metal oxides. Reduction of metal oxides to metals. We go to reduction of metal oxides to metals. In general, we try to take, because the process is reduction, the metallurgical process is reduction, so we need a reducing agent. So reducing agents, we can take plenty of examples. It all depends on what kind of reducing agent you can use. H2 gas is a good reducing agent. Carbon solid, which is acting as a coke, is a good reducing agent. Carbon monoxide gas is a good reducing agent. Sometimes even the metals, that is more reactive metals also, more reactive metals which are placed above hydrogen in reactivity series. Above hydrogen in reactivity series also can act as reducing agents. So one such example is, for example, if you are taking, for example, in Goldsmiths aluminothermic reaction, in Goldsmith's aluminothermic reaction, in order to get the molten iron, we just take Fe2O3 when it is treated with aluminium acting as a good reducing agent, so it forms iron plus Al2O3 plus exothermic reaction. Large amount of energy is released in the case of exothermic reaction, that is energy, large amount of energy is released. It's an exothermic reaction. So this is Goldsmith's aluminothermic process, and here we get molten iron which is red hot, and here almost 1500 degrees centigrade of temperature. To balance the equation, take 2 over here, take 3 over here, the reaction is going to get balanced. Then similarly, if you take wolframate, if you are subjecting it to hydrogen acting as a reducing agent, yes, it can give you the tungsten, that is solid, plus H2O, that is liquid, heating at a high temperature. So this is the wolframate, and this is tungsten. So likewise, you can take number of examples as acting as reducing agents. Even in the extraction of iron also, what we are doing here is we are taking Fe2O3 and you are treating it with the carbon solid, which is acting as a reducing agent. It is reducing, the ferric oxide is getting reduced to, that is iron plus that is carbon monoxide is obtained. Iron plus carbon monoxide gas is obtained. Balance the equation, take there are 2 irons, and take 3 over here and take 3 over here, the reaction gets balanced, and here the temperature is around greater than 700 degrees centigrade, and here the iron which you got is molten iron. So in this way we can extract as many number of metals as possible by treating it with suitable reducing agent. Sometimes you can see that we can say that more reactive metal goes into solution, and less reactive metal gets deposited. During the reduction process. So in other words, I mean to say, if you take cupric aqueous plus iron, if you are going to take, this is acting as a reducing agent, which is more reactive element because of low SRP value. You get here copper solid plus Fe2 plus aqueous solution. So this is solid. So this equation indicates that always less reactive metal gets reduced and the more reactive metal gets oxidized. So therefore, in this way also we can show how the reducing agent is going to function from the electrochemical reaction. This is nothing but the electrochemical process. It is the electrochemical process. So here the next part of the discussion is thermodynamic principles. Thermodynamic principles involved in metallurgical process. Thermodynamic process involved in metallurgical process. So here if you take the thermodynamic principles involved in metallurgical process, the metallurgical process, the point number 1 is, if you go for any metallurgical process actually involves the extraction of metal through the process of reduction through the process of reduction, or through the process of, one is you can take the process of reduction, one is you can take the process of reduction extraction of metal, another one is through the electrochemical or electrolytic process. So actually, to understand this, we need three important formulae, three important thermodynamic parameters. So here the feasibility, let me put it in this way, the feasibility of the metallurgical process, should obey three important equations. One is delta G is equal to delta H minus T into delta S is one equation. Then delta G naught is equal to minus ln of RT of Kc is one expression, and another one is delta G naught is equal to minus NF of E naught of cell. So this is what these three equations it has to obey. First one, second one, and third one. If you go for the first one, this is Gibbs-Helmholtz free energy equation. Gibbs-Helmholtz free energy equation. If you go for Gibbs-Helmholtz free energy equation, this is one Gibbs-Helmholtz free energy equation, and in the second case you are finding that the standard free energy of the metallurgical process is directly related to the equilibrium constant, and also the standard free energy of the given electrochemical process is again related to the standard electrode potential of the cell. So what we need to understand here is, that is feasibility of the process, metallurgical process, it is always feasible when the conditions are A, delta G is always negative, the standard free energy should be negative. When standard free energy is negative, then you find that the entropy change should be negative. Here the entropy change for a given that is thermodynamics, that is metallurgical process, the entropy change is negative, means it also means that you're finding that the change in number of moles also should be negative. Under such case, we can take, that is enthalpy change is equal to, that is negative. It can be negative or it can be positive, whatever. And also second case is like delta G naught. If you take delta G naught should be negative, provided if equilibrium constant is positive, because when I say equilibrium constant is positive, that means the more and more amount of reactants are getting converted to products, and the equilibrium is shifting in the forward direction. So the reaction, the metallurgical process or the metallurgical reaction proceeds in the forward direction, and more amount of reactants gets completed to products, and you find that the yield of the extraction of metal also will increase once the standard free energy of the reaction is going to become negative if the equilibrium constant is positive. And if you go for the third case, that is standard free energy of the electrochemical process or electrolytic process, particularly electrochemical process, if you take, we can see that the overall value of the delta E naught of cell, that is if delta G naught should be negative, then you find that the overall value of electrode potential of the cell, overall value of the potential of the cell, remove the E naught from here, this is potential of the cell, overall value of the potential of cell should be negative, because if it is negative, then only you can just see that the standard free energy is positive, should be negative, then only you can see that the delta G naught value is negative, and the overall reaction, we can see that the overall process is going to become spontaneous. So apart from this, actually here the thermodynamic principles involved in the metallurgical process actually involves, so here one more point I would like to write here, one more point I would like to highlight here, that is the thermodynamics involved in metallurgical operation. In a metallurgical operation, the thermodynamic involved, the thermodynamic process involved in the metallurgical operation, if we take here, it involves the, that is particularly the Gibbs-Helmholtz free energy equation, delta G is equal to delta H minus T into delta S. So here what we have to understand here is, like in the metallurgical operation, if you take the thermodynamic process, here if you are saying that delta G is equal to delta H minus T into delta S, so I am going to take the process. But before going to that, because we already said that in the metallurgical operation we are taking carbon as a good reducing agent, so what we are noticing here is, suppose if I am taking delta G is equal to delta H minus T into delta S, so this also means that if I am multiplying minus on both sides, delta G is equal to, that is plus T into delta S, that is T into delta S minus of plus of delta H will be the best combination for any thermodynamic process. Here we can say that the free energy delta G is negative, here delta G is negative, entropy change is positive, and the enthalpy change is also positive. I think this could be one of the best combinations where you can take for any metallurgical operation. So so if you're finding that the entropy is positive, if you're finding that the entropy is positive, that means you're finding that the slope, so we have to see what kind of slope is operating here, or you can just take the same value as delta G minus of delta G is equal to, this is plus of T into delta S minus delta H. So in this we are taking delta G negative, entropy as positive, and enthalpy as negative. So this is one more combination where we can carry out the metallurgical operation. And what we are noticing here is, suppose if you are taking, if carbon is acting as a reducing agent, if carbon is acting as a reducing agent, then you find that if 1 mole of carbon solid reacts with the 1 mole of oxygen gas, then you find that here carbon dioxide gas is produced. So here the change in number of moles is equal to 0, because you are finding that number of moles of the products is equal to 1 and number of moles of the reactants is also equal to 1. Carbon is a solid, so therefore the change in number of moles from reactants to products is equal to 0, because entropy change always depends only in the gaseous molecules, but it never depends on the solid molecules. That's why we can say change in the number of moles is equal to 0. If that is the case, if delta N is 0, then you can say that delta G will become equal to delta H. Under such circumstances the slope becomes 0. If the slope is 0, then you get a straight line which is parallel to x-axis when you draw the graph. Then similarly, if you take carbon solid plus half mole of oxygen gas, if you take, then you're going to get carbon monoxide gas. So here you can just take that, here the delta N value, number of moles, here number of moles of the products minus number of moles of the reactants, 1 minus half is half, so again delta N is positive. If delta N is positive, then you find that delta S is also positive, then you get slope is again positive when we draw the graph between delta G and the temperature for various metal oxides as well as metals. So like this, that means in other words, what exactly I mean to say is that the thermodynamics involved in the metallurgical operation is actually given by the Ellingham's diagram. It is given by the Ellingham's diagram. This Ellingham's diagram is nothing but, it is the graph which is being plotted. Ellingham's diagram is nothing but the plot which is the graph which is being plotted between the temperature of various metal oxides and the delta G naught of the various metallurgical operations. So when we are saying here temperature, when we are saying slope is 0, it means that we get a straight line which is parallel to the x-axis, and when we say slope is positive, then we can say that this is the positive slope. Here the slope is positive, and when we say slope is negative, if you are going to get slope as negative, then that means the slope is going to fall like this. This is the slope. So this is negative slope, this is positive slope, and here the slope is 0. So what we are noticing here is in this graph, as you are moving from bottom to the top, from left to right, from the origin, here the temperature starts somewhere between 300 degrees centigrade and it goes up to 1400 degrees centigrade, and here the delta G value is always taken in terms of negative, so it starts with minus 1400 kilojoules. Delta G in terms of kilojoules we take kilojoules per mole, and by the time you reach the topmost region it's going to become almost minus 200 kilojoules per mole. So at one stage it becomes 0 also, so this is minus of 0 kilojoules. So that means all the reducing agent, the choice of the reducing agent and one metal reducing the other metal oxide again depends upon the different curves. For example, I am giving you two different curves here, starting from minus like this is one curve, and I'll take another curve like this. At one particular point both the curves will meet like this. So there is a common point observed, say around 1350 degrees centigrade, and you find that the above one is Al2O3 and the below one is magnesium oxide, or you can take in either of the case. I'll take here magnesium oxide, here I'll take magnesium oxide, and here I'm going to take Al2O3. So at a particular temperature of 1350 degrees centigrade, neither magnesium oxide can reduce the oxide of aluminium, or the oxide of aluminium can reduce the magnesium oxide. So if the temperature is below 1350 degrees centigrade, then you find that aluminum oxide becomes a good reducing agent. The magnesium oxide becomes a good reducing agent for aluminum oxide, and if the temperature is greater than 1350 degrees centigrade, then aluminum oxide becomes good reducing agent for the reduction of magnesium oxide. In general, the metal oxide which is present below the metal oxide which is present below the metal oxide which is present below the curve for the given graph, that will become the good reducing agent than the metal oxide which is present above the curve between two metal oxides, because as you move from bottom to the top, you find that the delta G value also increases. When the delta G value increases, the metallurgical process changes from spontaneous process to the non-spontaneous process, because any metallurgical process you take, the delta G value has to be more negative. That means the lesser value it should be. So when you're moving from bottom to the top in the y coordinate and the delta G value is increasing, that means the metallurgical process is moving from the spontaneous process to the non-spontaneous process. So the reactivity, the more better reducing agents in the Elingham diagram always is observed at the bottommost region of the y coordinate of the delta G value, and less reducing agents they are observed at the topmost region of the Ellingham's diagram. So in this way we can analyze the Ellingham's diagram using the graph. So here this is one particular case where you can observe the slope, which is here the zero slope you are able to observe. In another case you are getting a positive slope, and also you can get a negative slope. So in this way we can plan out one by one, and we can select the choice of the reducing agent. The main significance of the Ellingham's diagram here is if you go for Ellingham's diagram, we can conclude with three important points. Ellingham's diagram gives you the choice of reducing agent. One is choice of reducing agent, then temperature at which metal oxide is getting reduced. And also we can find out what kind of slope is operating for different reducing agents, whether the given reducing agent is having an increased entropy with positive value or decreased entropy with negative value. Usually the reducing agents with the negative entropy are the best choices to reduce the metal oxides to metal, because negative slope indicates that it is having lesser free energy for reducing the given metal oxide to the metal, rather than the reducing agents which are having the positive slope. So the next part of the discussion here is extraction of metals which are highly electropositive in nature. Like for example, if you take sodium, magnesium, aluminium, then sodium, magnesium, aluminium, all these they belong to SN_P block. They cannot be prepared through ordinary methods, but they can be prepared only through the electrolytic process. So here if you take aluminium, if we take the extraction of aluminium through the process of electrolysis, the electrolysis process is named as, that is Hall-Heroult. This method's name is called Hall-Heroult method, in which we take the electrolyte is that is Na3AlF6 plus Al2O3. Al2O3 is aluminium oxide, alumina, and it is mixed with cryolite. This is cryolite, and this is alumina. So this is the fused mixture. This is a fusion mixture, and here the electrodes, if we are taking electrodes, that is, one is anode, another one is cathode. Cathode is given a carbon lining. And if you take anode, it is given carbon graphite anode rods. If you take, and so anode is given a positive sign convention and cathode is given a negative sign convention. So at anode you find that oxidation takes place, and at cathode you find reduction occurs. So the first and the foremost reaction what we have to understand here is, if you go for graphite anode rods and carbon lining cathode, so if you go for the process of electrolysis, first you take this cryolite Na3AlF6, it undergoes electrolytic dissociation. To give 3 moles of sodium fluoride and 1 mole of aluminium fluoride. Take this aluminium fluoride, take 2 moles of aluminium fluoride, again it dissociates to give 2 moles of aluminium cations plus 6 moles of fluoride ions. So therefore the aluminium ions, they are deposited at cathode, and fluoride ions also they accumulate at anode. So therefore let us write the reaction, cathodic and anodic reaction. At anode, if you are taking that is 6 moles of fluoride ion, so 6 moles of fluoride ion, they get oxidized to give 3 moles of fluorine gas, plus 6 electrons are lost. This is de-electronation. And at cathode, if you take the cathode, at cathode you find that 2 moles of aluminium cations, it gains 6 electrons to give 2 moles of aluminium solid. But this aluminium solid, it actually comes in contact. This aluminium solid or this fluorine, if you take, so the aluminium is deposited. So here therefore the ratio of, one important point what we have to note down here is ratio of the products obtained at anode is to cathode. At anode is to cathode, if you take, at anode we can take, that is 3 moles of fluorine, and at cathode you can take 2 moles of aluminium. So therefore the ratio is 3:2. In the meantime, the fluorine gas, being highly reactive gas, goes and attacks the unreacted aluminium oxide. So now they take this fluorine gas, takes the aluminium fluoride. In turn it is attacked by the fluorine gas. So when it attacks the fluorine gas, you get aluminium fluoride plus oxygen gas. So this is 2 moles of aluminium, 3, then you take 3 moles of gas. So I think I have to take here, balance the equation. If you are balancing the equation, take 2 over here, then 6 oxygens, then 4 aluminiums. If it is 4 aluminiums, then 4 3 is 12. So 4 3 is 12 means, then I think you need to take 6 moles of fluorine gas. So this oxygen gas which is obtained, it goes and in turn starts targeting the graphite anode rods at the anode. So therefore the one more reaction what you can notice is the carbon graphite rods are under attack. Then they give rise to 2 different types of gases. One is carbon monoxide gas and carbon dioxide gas. As long as the graphite rods are active in the electrolytic process, you find that the bulb is connected to the both the cathode and anode. The bulb is connected. Once the bulb is connected, you find that the experimental setup looks like this. It's almost like what we're going to do is, this is electrolytic vessel. We fill the electrolyte like this, and we give a carbon lining. This is carbon lining. This is a kind of carbon lining, and here you sprinkle that is carbon powder, and you take the plates, graphite rod plates will be given over here, and this you find that this is, graphite rods are positive, this is positive, and this is cathode lining. So this is cathode lining negative, and both are connected externally to a small bulb like this. A small bulb is given. As long as the anodes, the graphite anodes are active, you find that all these graphite anodes, if they are active, this is carbon lining. You can say that this is carbon lining which is acting as cathode. This is acting as cathode, and these are graphite rods. These are graphite rods, and this is the electrolyte, Al2O3 plus Na3 AlF6, Na3AlF6, and this is the electrolytic vessel. So the bulb keeps on glowing as the graphite rods are active, but once the graphite rods are being attacked by the carbon powder, once the graphite rods are being attacked by the oxygen liberated from the aluminum fluoride, you find that this graphite rod, they starts melting, they goes into the solution, and you find that there's a dip, there's a decrease in the luminosity of the bulb. The bulb slowly starts diminishing its glow, and at one stage the bulb is completely put off with its glowness. At one stage the bulb do not glow. Then at that stage we have to understand that the graphite rods which are kept in the electrolytic solution of the alumina and the cryolite have been exhausted. Again we have to take the fresh set of the graphite anodes we have to take into the electrolytic solution, and again we have to restart the electrolytic process. And in this way, repeatedly, by doing this, you can increase the yield of ammonia, and you can see that the unwanted reactions in the electrolytic process can be stopped. And this is how we try to extract the aluminium through the Hall-Hérold's method. So here the next part of the discussion is, that is vapor phase refining of metals. When we reach the stages of refining, that means you are trying to obtain the purity of the metal almost from 98% to 99.9%. I repeat, to obtain the highest form of the purity of the metal, generally by carrying out the process of electrolysis, you will be getting almost 98% of the pure metal. But the next higher level of the purification of the metal, if you want the metal to be in the ultra pure form, which is of the highest purity of nearly 100%, let me say, if it is 100% means let us say 99.9%. Obtaining 99.9% of the purified form of metal is nothing but the ultra pure metal. So ultra purity of the metals can be acquired for only few metals like titanium, zirconium, and nickel in particular. These are the three metals where we can obtain them in the ultra pure form by subjecting them to the special type of refining process, which we call it as vapor phase refining of metals. That means what we are going to do is, we generally take the metal in the crude form. It is already in the it is in the purified form only, but there are some volatile impurities present in this metal. These volatile impurities have to be removed out with immediate effect. So if the metal is in the impure form, means only little amount of impurities are there in this metal, so that is titanium. So titanium, when it is taken, when it is treated with iodine, iodine is the sublime solid, it is treated with iodine at around low temperature, at around 540 Kelvin, it forms tetraiodo titanium, titanium iodide we are going to get, which is covalent, volatile, and it is stable. And this, upon heating to a very high temperature, that is on strong heating, almost a temperature of 1700 Kelvin temperature, if you are going to heat, then it loses the vaporized iodine, and again it is going to release all the impurities. It will also lose all the unwanted impurities, and finally you are going to get the titanium vapor. Upon cooling, it gets solid, and that solid is going to become the pure titanium solid. Now right now it is almost 99.9% pure here. 99.9% purity you will observe in the case of titanium, which is pure. Likewise, you can also take the zirconium on the same method. So both these methods comes under the Van Arkel's method. The method is called Van Arkel's method. So where the zirconium, which is having a little amount of impurities, just 0.01% of the impurities or 0.1% of impurities are present still, that is treated with iodine solid at a very low temperature at around 540 Kelvin. You get zirconium iodide, which is volatile, stable, covalent solid. Again, when you are heating it to a very high temperature upon strong heating, yes, zirconium becomes a vapor. This vapor becomes solid upon cooling, which is pure, 99.9% pure, and the iodine vapors are left out and also impurities are left out. You get pure zirconium. Likewise, if you want to prepare the pure nickel, it is subjected to a special process called Mons process, and that Mons process we call it as, that is, first we take the impure nickel, then you treat it with 4 moles of the carbon monoxide gas or the carbonyl molecules, then it gives metal carbonyl. This is called metal carbonyl. It gives a metal carbonyl complex. It gives a metal carbonyl complex wherein which the oxidation state of nickel is always, in metal carbonyls the oxidation state of metal is 0. That's because it is coordinated with the neutral ligands. So that's why the oxidation state of the nickel becomes 0. Upon strong heating, temperature not less than around 1500 Kelvin to 1800 Kelvin, upon strong heating you get pure nickel, and the byproduct is 4 moles of carbon monoxide gas. In this way we are able to prepare even nickel also to its purest extent, and it is up to 99.9%, that is pure form. So in this way we can extract the metals, we can prepare the metals, or we can isolate the metals in the extremely pure form through the method called vapor phase refining. And in this vapor phase refining we have done with the titanium, zirconium and nickel. Nickel we are doing it with Mons process, and titanium and the zirconium we are trying to do it through the Van Arkel's method.